So let me go ahead and introduce today's presenter, Julia Anderson. Julia has a master's degree in history with an education emphasis and is an accredited genealogist and accredited genealogist lecturer. She is a research specialist at the FamilySearch Library on the United States and Canada team. So I'll go ahead and turn things over to Julia.
All right. Thank you so much, Beth. Welcome to African American Records and Strategies. I have 4 main objectives for this class. First, I'll explain some key methodology for African American genealogical research. Then I will demonstrate 5 success strategies for locating your ancestors in historical records. Third, I'll guide you in organizing and evaluating your research results. And finally, I will enable you to access unique African American sources and use FamilySearch tools to make your research time more effective. Methodology describes the ways genealogists approach certain types of research problems, specifically what resources they would use and the order in which they might utilize those resources. Someone researching members of the aristocracy in 16th century England is going to use different research methodology than someone looking for enslaved people in 18th century Barbados. You can learn about African American research methodology from many sources. I would like to highlight just a couple of these. The first is called 10 Steps to Reclaiming Your African Roots, a guide to navigating African American genealogy, published by FamilySearch in 2020. This booklet, available in PDF format, will guide you through the basics. You can scan the QR code or click on the link in the class handout. We'll be covering many of the principles listed in the guide during this presentation, but it is a great resource that can help you through the process step by step. Another resource is the Library of Congress's research guide entitled African American Genealogical Research. It includes ideas for getting started, guidebooks, case studies, bibliographies, and a tutorial on using the Library of Congress. You can find many other resources online and even in your public library. At the risk of grossly oversimplifying things, African American genealogy research basically has 2 categories: after 1865 and before 1865. 1865 is important because it marked the official end of slavery in the United States. Laws regarding African Americans, both free and enslaved, before and after that time differed greatly. Basically, if you're researching after 1865, you follow the standard research process for genealogy research in the United States. Some of the specific resources may differ, especially by region and time period, but the process is essentially the same. If you're researching before 1865 and your ancestor was free, follow the standard research process. If your ancestor was enslaved, you must identify the slaveholder or the potential slaveholder, then follow the standard research process for the slaveholder. So what is this standard research process? Simply put, it is a cycle that has 5 components: gather known information, choose a research goal, find new information, evaluate new information, and share new information. And we'll be talking about each of those in more depth. The first component of the research process is gather. When we say gather, we mean to start collecting what you already have. Write down stories or family traditions you remember. Compile your photographs and family documents, and include things like yearbooks, newspaper articles, and programs for special events. Next, ask your close relatives for stories and traditions they remember. See if they have photographs or family documents they would be willing to share. Ask if you can make copies or take pictures. After checking with your immediate family, reach out to more distant relatives. You never know what family treasures might be hiding in someone else's attic or closet. Always ask for permission to make copies and take photos, and be sure to respect your relatives' privacy. If they're hesitant to share at first, they may agree at a later time, especially if you have something to share with them. Next, you're going to want to organize everything you have gathered. One way to do this is to set up a free FamilySearch account and enter the information into Family Tree. You can scan and upload photos and documents and attach those as memories of family members. This will allow you to collaborate with others who have common ancestors. After we have reviewed and organized the evidence we gathered, the next part of the research process is to choose a research goal. As you're entering information into Family Tree, you may have come across some places where you have blanks. This is where you do not yet know the identity of one or both of your ancestors' parents. In some cases, these individuals may already be named in Family Tree, but they aren't linked yet to your branch of the family. Other times, they may not have been identified and entered by anyone. These blank spaces are a great springboard for choosing a research goal. First, try asking some questions like, who were the parents of Easter Easton, who was born in 1845 and married Elijah Taylor Jr.? Where were they married? Where was she born? When did she die? When I'm writing a research goal, I ask, what do you already know? In this case, I know that Easter Easton was born in about 1845 and married Elijah Taylor Jr. The next question I ask is, what do you want to know? Well, I want to know, who were Easter's parents? Using this information, I can now write a research goal. Find the parents of Easter Easton, who was born in about 1845 and married Elijah Taylor Jr. As you are choosing a research goal, you want to start with what you already know and go from there to what you want to know. If you try to start researching your family but don't link each generation going back in time, it's easy to start following the wrong person. After we gather known information and choose a specific research goal, the third part of the standard research process is to find new information in historical records that will answer your research questions. In order to find new information, we first need to make a plan. We want to select the best records, obtain the records, and study the records. In selecting the best records, it can be helpful to ask the following questions. What records are available? What records will answer my research question? And what records are the most reliable? A great resource for selecting records is the FamilySearch Research Wiki. It has helpful genealogy pages for every county in the United States. It also has what are called record finder tables that guide you in what records to look at for each kind of research question. Here's an example of a county genealogy page for Mobile, Alabama. It is loaded with information about the county records and resources. It even has a table for when certain key types of records began and if there was any record loss. If I look up United States Record Finder on the FamilySearch Research Wiki, I can get a record finder table for maiden names and family members. If you're searching for an individual's parents, it says the best records to search are likely vital, church, census, and probate records, as well as obituaries. Alternative records could be Bible records, newspapers, and immigration records. Of course, all these record types may not exist for the time and place when you're researching and may not necessarily apply to your family, but it is a really good place to start. When you're researching, the best records to use are generally original sources with primary information. An original record is the first time a certain record is created. It's not a copy, transcription, or index like those derivative records shown here. Primary information is first-hand information recorded at or near the time of an event. Secondary or second-hand information is less reliable and more likely to have errors. One document, such as this death certificate, can have both primary and secondary information. Primary information about the person's death and burial, and secondary information about the person's birth and parents. Good records to use for African American research vary depending on the time period you're researching. In the 20th century, you may rely on census, vital, military, and Social Security records, as well as newspapers. Research in the 19th century also calls for census, vital, and military records, but also special record sets like the Freedmen's Bureau and Freedmen's Bank records. When researching an individual's enslaver, you will need access, land and probate records, and manuscript collections. More modern types of records did not generally exist in the 18th century, so we need to rely even more on land and property, probate, and tax records, and those manuscript collections. Once you have decided what records you want to search, you need to obtain those records. They can be held in various places, like online repositories, such as free and commercial websites, government offices like courthouses and state archives, private collections like church and university libraries, and in books and periodicals that may be available for purchase or at your public library. Once you have obtained the records, you need to study them. Look for indexes. Look beyond your ancestor for family members and other associated people. Be thorough. Don't skip any lines or columns, and make sure you understand what the record is saying. And be sure to record your results. If you are anything like me, if you don't write something down, you won't remember it tomorrow, much less in 10 or 20 years. A great way to record your research is to create a research log. This can be a table, spreadsheet, notebook, or electronic document. Here's one I created to keep track of my research for Easter Easton Taylor. It has her name, my research goal, which is to find her parents, and places to record the date of my search, the purpose of my search, the source I searched, my research notes, and a document number. In this example, I wanted to locate Easter with her husband Elijah Taylor in the 1870 census. I located the document for free on FamilySearch. Then I copied the information and wrote it out so I could read it more easily. Elijah and Easter were living in Rusk County, Texas. They had 4 children living in the household: Alice, Julia, Frank, and Emery. This record doesn't tell me how the people in the household were related, but it sort of looks like Elijah and Easter may have been living as a married couple and were the parents of the children. At this point, that is only a hypothesis, and I would need more information to prove or disprove that. I recorded the date of my search on my research log, the purpose of my search, which was to locate Easter with her husband, the source citation, which tells me exactly where I found the record, my research notes, which is telling me what was in the record so I can look at it and remember really fast, and then the document number so I can organize my research notes. This will help me remember what I found and return to the document really quickly if I need to. It will also make it easier for me to collaborate with others and share my results. After I have found historical records and recorded the information, I need to evaluate them. Like the standard research process, the evaluation cycle can be broken up into 5 parts. We aren't going to talk too much about them in this class, but the steps include transcribe the record, analyze the record, correlate the evidence, resolve conflicts, and conclude facts. When I'm evaluating a record, I find it helpful to ask myself questions such as, to whom does this apply? What does it mean? Does this evidence fit with what I already know? Is there conflicting data? Can I trust this information? And what clues does this give me for future research? After I have evaluated the information and reached a conclusion, the next step in the standard research process is to share what I have learned. Sharing helps in many ways, not least of which is that we might find additional information from distant relatives that wasn't passed down in our branch of the family. The FamilySearch family tree has several ways to collaborate with other researchers built right in. Other ways to share include newsletters, blogs, social media posts, and family reunions. Next, I'm going to briefly cover 5 success strategies you can use in your research to get better results. Success strategy number 1 is to go from the known to the unknown. You usually want to start with the most recent records and work back in time. For instance, I might start with my ancestor's death record, then search census records during her lifetime, then find her marriage record, and then a birth record. It is also important to verify all family traditions and information received from others, including what is posted online or printed in any books. Success strategy number 2 is to search every available record for each of your ancestors' life events. For example, If I wanted to locate or verify death information for my ancestor, I could look for a death certificate, an obituary, a cemetery record, and a funeral program or funeral home records. You can see that each of these documents, a death certificate, obituary, and register of death, includes vastly different information about the deceased. Put together, these would give me a more well-rounded picture of the events that happened at the end of my ancestor's life than I would get from any one single record. Success strategy number 3 is to find records of all the known family members. This will help you understand the family structure because records of family members could have more information than the records created specifically for your person of interest. Siblings of ancestors are especially important because they usually have the same parents and grandparents. Success strategy number 4 is to be aware of name changes. After the Civil War, many African Americans changed their names. Enslavers often shortened the names of those persons they had enslaved or called them only by nicknames. A man named James Robert Jones by his mother might have only been called Jem. After emancipation, choosing a surname was one of the freedoms African Americans experienced. Sometimes they chose their enslaver's surname for convenience, or they chose the surname of a family member's enslaver or a former enslaver. Others chose the surnames of famous people they admired. Be aware that your ancestor might have tried one name for a while and then changed to another name, or even switched back and forth between names on different records. Here's an example of some minor name changes for Gabriel Robinson, who was born in 1878. The table includes a list of the records that mention Gabriel and shows how his name alternated between Robinson, Robertson, and Robertson between 1880 and 1963. Be aware of this possibility when looking at records, and do not limit yourself to only those persons with the exact name you think your ancestor used. This is a photograph of Martin Jackson, who had previously been enslaved. In an interview in 1937, he explained how he chose his surname after the Civil War. The master's name was usually adopted by a slave after he was set free. This was done more because it was the logical thing to do and the easiest way to be identified than it was through affection for the master. I got thinking about all us slaves that was going to take the name Fitzpatrick. I made up my mind I'd find me a different one. One of my grandfathers in Africa was called Jackio, and so I decided to be a Jackson. If you were looking for this man as Martin Fitzpatrick based on the name of his enslaver, it is very unlikely that you would find him, especially if he left the area where he had been enslaved shortly after emancipation. Success strategy number 5 is to study the local history. Migration patterns can give you clues about where your family came from and where they went. Local laws will help you understand why your ancestors did certain things, as well as what records they might have created. Industry and agriculture of the area can help you learn what your ancestors did for work and what their economic situation was like. Folk customs can explain where your family traditions began, and religious beliefs can give you more background on your family's lifestyle. Local entertainment is important too, as you can see from this photograph of an African American brass band. Be aware that historical records referred to your ancestors with terms that were common for the time period. These could be considered offensive today, but it is important to understand what they mean. Segregation was a real issue, even in record keeping. African Americans might have been listed in a separate colored register, the back of the register, or in the regular or white register. In segregated records, if your ancestor is not listed in the colored section, check the white section of the record. Not all clerks recorded events the same way. Here's an example of a colored marriage record. The entries inside do not refer to the individual's race and are much the same as the marriage records for the white members of the same community. This is the corresponding white register and the record. Remember, if you do not find your ancestors in the so-called colored records, check the white records too. Once you have located historical records that contain information about your family members, What do you do with it? Well, it's very important that you organize and evaluate it. Genealogists need to correlate or compare every piece of evidence they find with evidence in other sources. Charts and forms can make correlation much easier because you can see a lot of information at a glance. Some of my favorite charts and forms are family group records, pedigree charts, extraction forms, tables, spreadsheets, and timelines. Pedigree charts keep track of direct line ancestors, vital event dates and places, and generational links. Family group records track nuclear families, vital event dates and places, and link to generations, parents and their children. Extraction forms are pre-printed pages that align with certain record types, such as censuses, to make recording the information quicker and easier. You can create your own tables and spreadsheets to record, track, and compare data. In this example, I was comparing the members of a particular household in two different census records. Timelines are invaluable tools for finding gaps in the information you have for an ancestor or their family over the lifetime of them. They typically include the ancestor's name, date, place, and event. They can also include source citations, historical events, and other entries. FamilySearch Family Tree uses artificial intelligence, or AI, to create an automatic timeline for your ancestors based on the information already in the tree. It also takes the same information and creates a brief life history of your ancestor. You can also use the print options in the tools box to print different kinds of charts that are already filled out with information based on what has been entered into Family Tree. You can also find blank forms on the FamilySearch Research Wiki. Once you have organized your new information, don't forget to go back to the evaluation cycle and transcribe, analyze, correlate, resolve, and conclude. For the remainder of the presentation, I will enable you to use FamilySearch to access unique African American sources and tools that can help you discover, gather, and connect your ancestors. Some key records that specifically mention African Americans include newspapers, slave narratives, Freedmen's Bureau and Freedmen's Bank records, land and property records, military records, probate records, church records, cemetery records, and manuscript collections. One resource FamilySearch offers is our brand new African American landing page, which automatically focuses your searches based on race and record type. If it doesn't work quite how you would expect, be sure to leave your feedback so our engineers can continue to make improvements. The QR code or link at the bottom of the screen will take you directly there. Our FamilySearch blog also contains many articles about African American research and heritage. Check out our latest article about Juneteenth published earlier this month. We also have many resources available for researchers. These include the African American Genealogy Wiki page, the African American Online Genealogy Wiki page, the Quick Guide to African American Records, the Southern States Slavery and Bondage Collections, the African American Digital Bookshelf, records of the Freedmen's Bureau and Freedmen's Bank, the Other Relationship feature on Family Tree, and the full text search on FamilySearch Labs. The links are all included in your handout. Since so many of these resources can be accessed through the Research Wiki, let's review how to get there. From the FamilySearch.org website, simply click on Search and then select Research Wiki in the drop-down menu. Next, type African American in the search bar. Then you will see a partial list of collections with African American in the title. You can select any of these, but I suggest starting with the page called African American Genealogy. From here, you can access the African American Online Genealogy Records, the FamilySearch Community for African American Research, African American Genealogy Wiki topics, and unique genealogical features. There is also a link for African American research specific to every state and the District of Columbia. Other helpful links can also be accessed from this page. The page called African American Online Genealogy Records is a collection of resources available online, regardless of where they're held. These records are listed by category and contain direct links to various websites and repositories. The Quick Guide to African American Records page explains how to begin your search and find records from different regions and time periods. It also explains how to use African American specific record collections, identify the slaveholder, and use helpful databases. It also links to guidebooks and tutorials. The page for Southern States Slavery and Bondage Collections categorizes resources by state and includes links to the records in the FamilySearch catalog. Many of them are digitized and are available for viewing online. The African American Digital Bookshelf is a list of books you can access online about tracing African American ancestors, historical context, and other resources. The digital books are organized by state. Books available on FamilySearch may only be accessed with a free account, but books from other repositories generally do not require an account. The Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, often called the Freedmen's Bureau, was created at the end of the Civil War to help formerly enslaved persons, called freedmen, and refugees. It supervised relief efforts, established schools and hospitals, distributed food and clothing, helped legalize marriages, find employment, and other duties. The Bureau also helped reunite families that were separated by slavery. It closed in 1872. During the 7 years it operated, the Bureau created hundreds of thousands of records, and these are digitized and available to search for free on FamilySearch. Before researching the records of the Freedmen's Bureau, it would be a good idea to read through the wiki page entitled Freedmen's Bureau Record Types, so you will better understand what you should be looking for. This is the discoverfreedmen.org website. Searches here go directly to the online Freedmen's Bureau records at FamilySearch, which are indexed. Here you can see that a search for Jack Jefferson brings back 190 filtered results. The collections that were searched are listed near the top of the page in blue. Not all of the Freedmen's Bureau records are indexed or named searchable. I think it is always a good idea to browse through the records from the field office closest to where your ancestor lived, because he or she might not be listed by the name you know them as today. Look for their family members and other associates, including slaveholders, and use additional identifying information such as occupation or physical description combined with family stories to locate your ancestors. Freedmen's Bureau records include censuses, marriage records, medical records, court records, contracts, rations, and homesteads. These records have information on full names, former slaveholders, plantations, current residences, ages, complexions, property ownership, crimes against, and school records, all of which are invaluable for tracing your ancestors and their relatives. For instance, here is a hospital record and a register of formerly enslaved persons. And this is a marriage record. Another rich resource for African American research is the records of the Freedmen's Bank. Its official title was the African American Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company. The bank was created in 1865 as a depository for Black veterans and formerly enslaved persons to build their savings. Many societies, churches, charities, and other private organizations also opened accounts and established trusts with the company. The bank helped establish hospitals, schools, and institutions before it closed in 1874. The collection of 480,000 names has been indexed by FamilySearch and is available to search for free online. These bank records contain important identifying information and can be extremely valuable in locating your ancestors and their family members. Here is the card for Henry Hobbs. It contains his address, age and complexion, the name of his wife, children, and siblings, information about his parents, birthplace, occupation, and other details. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that the new African American landing page automatically filtered your searches by race. I'm going to demonstrate another way to do this. This is the database for the 1900 US Census. I accessed it by selecting Search, then Records. I typed 1900 Census for the collection title and selected this option. In this example, I searched for Alice Valtz, an African American woman who lived in Texas. After entering her information, I clicked Search. I got 2 results. In the upper right-hand corner, it says Add Ancestor Information. Here is a blow-up of that view. One of the choices here is race. Once I select race, a warning screen pops up that says, the language and content used on the FamilySearch records have been copied directly as they were documented by the creators of the historical records. In other words, the records used terms that were common at the times the records were created. And yes, those terms can be offensive, but just be prepared. Once I click on OK on the warning screen, I can select Erase from the drop-down menu. I decided to try black, since that was a common designation on census records at the turn of the 20th century. Next, I clicked Search, but got the same 2 results. I checked the other race filter button under the name of the collection. This showed that 2 records were designated black. I clicked Apply. The results show me that both options for Alice Valtz in Texas were listed as black on the record. The first person was the one I was looking for. This can be a great way to filter results down to a manageable number, especially if you're looking for someone with a very common name. Another relatively new feature on FamilySearch is part of Family Tree and is called Other Relationships. Robert Alexander Taylor and his wife, Mary Maria Woods Taylor, were slaveholders in Texas when Mary passed away in 1852. She died intestate, leaving no will. In order to settle her estate, an inventory had to be made of her property, including anything she owned in common with her husband. In Mary's probate file was an inventory of her estate taken in January 1857. This included land, enslaved people, cattle, and miscellaneous property such as furniture and tools. The enslaved persons were named. One Negro woman named Emily, aged 30 years, and her 3 children, Eugene, aged 6 years, Harriet, aged 4 years, and Texana, aged 3 years. One Negro man named Elijah, aged 43 years, one Ditto or Negro, Dilsey, aged 45 years, and the wife of the above, and their children, Viz. Elijah Jr., aged 22 years, Anne, aged 17 years, Lewis, aged 18 years, Mary, 13 years, Elizabeth, 11 years, Julia, 9 years, Huey, 7 years, and Charles, aged 5 years. So the first enslaved family mentioned in the probate file was the family of Emily with her 3 children, Eugene, Harriet, or who I think is Harriet, and Texana. The second enslaved family was that of Elijah and Dilsey, with their children Elijah Jr., Lewis, Anne, Mary, Elizabeth, Julia, Huey, and Charles. I figured out their approximate birth years by subtracting their ages from the date on the probate file. Another page in the probate file states, all the aforesaid property, meaning the enslaved persons, was acquired by him, meaning Robert Taylor, in the state of Missouri, except some of the young Negroes, which are the children of those women brought by your petitioner into the state of Texas from the state of Missouri. I could go to property records in Missouri next, and see if I could locate more records regarding these enslaved families. But first, I wanted to record what I had already found. But how could I do this? I didn't know their last names, or if they even had any. All I knew was their relationship to each other and the identity of their slaveholders. Well, first I went to Robert Alexander Taylor's person page on FamilySearch Family Tree. Then I scrolled down to the bottom of the screen to the section called Other Relationships. I selected Add Other Relationship. If I click on the little down arrow in the relationship box, it pulls up a drop-down menu. From that menu, I chose Enslavement. The screen will then identify who it thinks the slaveholder is and who the enslaved person is. If it is backwards, you can select the arrow icon in the middle to switch their positions. On this page, I can add any information I have about the individual. I could also add a person by their personal ID number if I know they're already in FamilySearch. Here you can see I added Emily, a female who is deceased and who I estimated to have been born in about 1827. The computer did not find an obvious match for Emily in Family Tree, so it stated there was no match found and gave me an option to create person. Next, I got a confirmation screen. It looked correct, so I clicked Save. Once I saved the information, it showed up on Robert Taylor's person page under the enslavement category. I went ahead and added all the enslaved individuals mentioned in Robert's deceased wife's probate file. Next, I was able to use the ID numbers generated by FamilySearch to connect the families. On the left is Emily with her 3 children, and on the right are Elijah and Dilsey with their 8 children. This Other Relationships option is a great tool we now have at our disposal to connect families even when we don't have surnames or other details that genealogists usually use to identify people. As we find additional information on these individuals, we can add that to the tree. The final tool I'm going to show you today is actually an experiment in FamilySearch Labs called Full Text Search. Using state-of-the-art AI technology, engineers at FamilySearch have taught the computers to read handwriting in various types of historical records. The computers then make a transcription of the records, and using optical character recognition, or OCR technology, those transcriptions and the accompanying documents have become every word searchable. This is literally the most exciting development I think I have ever seen with technology in genealogy. Full text search provides access to over 100 million unindexed document images, and you can search every single word in the text. By using different parameters, you can find exact words and phrases, and you can also focus your search to include specific years, record types, locations, and collections. You can get to full text search from this URL or from your logged in FamilySearch homepage. The link will take you to this page on available experiments. These are beta versions of new features FamilySearch is testing. Choose the tile in the top middle or the one that says Expand your search with full text. Then select Try it or Go to Experiment. In the box that says Start your search, you can select more options. That will bring up a second search bar for ancestor information. There are currently only 2 types of collections available here that will be helpful for African American research: U.S. land and probate records and U.S. plantation records. FamilySearch plans to continue adding collections as more record transcriptions are generated. In order to get the most out of these records, it is important to know some guidelines for searching. I highly recommend watching the tutorial video on the main page as you enter the experiment. Both search bars work as keyword searches, and you can use either one or both. Here are a few search tips to help you get the most out of this exciting technology. These come directly from the website, and you can look them up there. Use quotation marks around an exact word or phrase, including first and last names. Use the plus symbol to include a specific word or phrase. Use the minus symbol to exclude a specific word or phrase. Use the question mark symbol to find different spellings. And use the asterisk symbol to find different forms of a root word or name. For instance, if I typed in the name Elijah Taylor, my results would include all the images with either the word Elijah or the word Taylor on them. If I put Elijah Taylor in quotes, I would get back all the images that included the words Elijah and Taylor together within about a word or so of each other. If I did a search for plus Elijah plus Taylor, I would get images with Elijah and Taylor on them, but not necessarily within a few words of each other. If I did a search and added plus Elijah and minus Taylor, I would get images with Elijah, but not if they also have Taylor on the same image. If I did a search and added plus Elijah Taylor in parentheses, I would get images with my original search term and Elijah or Taylor. The question mark wildcard replaces one letter in a word. For instance, if I typed TA question mark LOR, I would get variations of the word Taylor and others with a similar spelling, like those on the screen. The asterisk wildcard replaces multiple letters or no letters in a word. If I typed TA asterisk R, I would get a number of different words containing the letters T, A, and R. It is always a good idea to use wildcards to expand your searches because computer-aided indexing can still make many mistakes. To get an idea of how these search tips can change your results, if I search for Elijah Taylor without quotes, I get over 4.5 million results. If I search for plus Elijah minus Taylor, I get 1.3 million results. If I search for plus Elijah plus Taylor, I get 111,000 results. With the name Elijah Taylor in quotation marks, I get 5,872 results. This is a great way to narrow your search results. I always like to start with a broader search and then narrow as I go. Another way to narrow or focus your search is by using filters. You can currently filter for record year, record type, record place, and location. When I filter by record year, it gives me centuries and then decades. Filtering by record type gives me a number of categories to choose from. Filtering by record place lets me choose the US, Mexico, Australia, and New Zealand, or other. If I choose US, then I can focus my search further by state, county, and sometimes city or town. Filtering by collection allows me to choose specific collections to search in, and I can also see how many records are in each collection. Here I did a search for Elijah Taylor in quotation marks. As you can see, I got results in Alexandria County, Virginia, Lynn County, Missouri, and Craven County, North Carolina, among many others. To filter by place, I can select the state, and in this case, I chose Missouri. Then I can select the county. Here I chose Johnson, and I can see how many records are available for each jurisdiction. After filtering by place, I had only 15 results, whereas before I had almost 6,000. Another reason this full text search is so amazing is because it makes it much easier to locate the names of enslaved persons. If I do a search for William Howard, a known slaveholder, in quotes, then add plus Negro slave in parentheses, I can find deeds that name those who are rarely mentioned in any other records. Here I filtered my results to Henderson County, Tennessee. 86 results were returned, including this deed from 1856. For instance, here it tells me that William deeded a 12-year-old boy named Mike, alias Jack, to his daughter Agnes, and Benjamin F. Howard was to be his guardian. My search terms are highlighted in yellow in the computer transcription on the right, and they are also highlighted on the document image itself. If I hover over a certain word in the transcription, it will turn blue, as will the corresponding word highlighted in the document. I can also download the document with or without the transcription by selecting the download icon above the transcription. When downloading, I can choose to include the record image with or without highlights, or just the transcription without the record image. I can also choose to include the record citation. Here's the document again. It gives me the names of all the parties in the transaction, the date and place of the transaction, witnesses, and the name of the enslaved person. The next thing I want to do with this information is preserve it by adding it to Family Tree using the Other Relationships feature we previously discussed. So I went through all the steps of adding in the name, adding the match, selecting the right thing, and there is Mike alias Jack added in the enslavement category. One thing to note, when you are using full text search, the number of matches you will get will depend on whether you are at home or at a FamilySearch center or affiliate library. Centers and affiliates have fewer record restrictions due to contractual obligations, so you will have greater success using this full text search feature when you're on site. You can still use it at home, but you just won't get as many results. Thank you so much for joining me today as we discussed African American records and strategies. During our time together, I have explained key methodology for African American research, demonstrated 5 success strategies for locating your ancestors in historical records, guided you in organizing and evaluating your research results, and enabled you to access unique African American resources and use FamilySearch tools for more effective research. So now I'm going to turn the time over to our moderator for some questions.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, Julia. Are there any questions about African American records and strategies? Go ahead and type into the comment section and we will answer what we can. So just getting some thank yous in the comment section.
You can post those in any platform that you're watching the presentation on.
Yes, definitely. Wherever you are, go ahead and post them and we'll pass them on. So we have a question. Since the surnames and spellings change, how do you decide which ones to use in your tree? Is it what is listed on the death record, on a headstone, or what the family uses today?
That is a really good question. So I usually like to use the name that was given closest to the time at birth, but it's up to you. If you want to use the name that they decided to go by for most of their adult life, that's totally fine. It's always important, though, to put things like that in the notes. You can, on FamilySearch Family Tree, you can add alternate names, so you can have all the names on there. And in the notes part, you can add any explanation about when the names changed or what the person wanted to be called as and so forth. So if you're trying to decide which record is for the right person, though, it's really important to analyze what you have and compare the people that are connected to your ancestor on the record and make sure that they're the same people that your ancestor was connected to in other records. So that's called correlation, and it's really important when you're doing research like this.
Awesome. Fawn asks, do counties in the South typically have records?
Yes, so counties in the South do have records. There is a lot of record loss throughout the South, however, but there are ways to get around that. So usually if a courthouse burned down, some of the records were saved. If not, there are also records from other jurisdictions that you can access. So church records, for instance, would not have been kept in the courthouse, so they would be unburned. And cemetery records weren't usually kept in the courthouse. Same with federal records like census records, tax records, some land records. So even when there's record loss, there are records that you can find that were kept in other locations.
Awesome. How do you search for an enslaved person if the enslaver is unknown?
That's a really good question. So in this case, you're going to have to find that person in the 1870 census, which was the first census record that listed everyone who was previously enslaved by name. And from there, you can look at families living next to them nearby in the neighborhood that were white and that owned land. And then you're going to have to look those people up in earlier records and find out if there's any indication that they purchased an individual who was enslaved or deeded them to someone else or mentioned them in other manuscripts. So that's where the research gets pretty in-depth and kind of tricky, but you just have to look at all the records, and sometimes you have to make some educated guesses and do the research on those, and then you either prove or disprove your guess or your hypothesis.
Great suggestion. Melody had actually asked about reviewing the examples of the searching in the full text search, and I'm just going to encourage you to go back and watch the presentation again. You'll be able to do that on the FamilySearch Libraries Facebook page, on the FamilySearch Facebook page, and on the FamilySearch YouTube channel. So go back and you can see that whole process that Julie went into. Really thorough, good information. So just go ahead and review that.
There's also on the front page of the full text search, there's a link to a video that will explain how to do good searching on that. So I really encourage you to watch that tutorial video. It will help you a lot.
Awesome. Good recommendations. We have a couple questions here about searching for African Americans, either with Native American lineage or who were enslaved by Native Americans.
So that becomes quite complicated, and there's a whole set of records, a whole separate methodology that has to do with researching Native Americans. A lot of times, Native American people enslaved African Americans, and those African Americans often migrated with the Native Americans to wherever they were going, to a reservation or what have you. And they can be listed in some of the Native American records. Other times, it really varies based on the location where they were. Beth, do you have any other tips for that?
I do know, I apologize, did you already mention like the Dawes Rolls and the Guion Miller?
I didn't mention them by name.
Okay, but that's the only resource. Those are the resources I tend to look at first when it comes to those kind of situations.
Thank you.
Just looking through the rest of the questions. Remember, if you have a specific research question for a specific location or a family member, please feel free to sign up for one of our virtual consultations. We'd love to help you out. Just go to familysearch.org/library. I think we've kind of run out of time for our class. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.